This is following on from our session last week where we were playing killer basketball, looking at erasal. Um, Make sure you find your own definition for the term erasal. You can get it in the course textbook, and I'd also like you to be able to define it yourself. So before you do anything else, make sure you do that. Um, we're going to look at two theories surrounding erasal, and they are the Hulse-Dry theory and the inverted U hypothesis. So first of all, the Hulse-Dry theory. You can see here we've got a rise along the bottom with level of performance going on the y-axis, and it's got something called a positive correlation between the two. So what this means is Hull stated that the more aroused you are, the better you're going to perform. So as arousal increases, so does performance. This is very much true for power events such as weightlifting. So if you think of Eddie Hall, when he had to break the world record for the deadlift, he had to get himself to an extremely high state of arousal to be able to perform that lift because it was such a heavy weight. If he had really low levels of arousal, his body wouldn't have been ready. He wouldn't have had the physiological responses to enable him to lift such a huge weight. However, the theory is invalid and it's unreliable. So if you consider someone like an archer, if they've got really high levels of arousal, causing lots and lots of adrenaline to go through their body, it's going to reduce their focus and their accuracy. The adrenaline is going to cause their arm to shake, which will affect the accuracy. And if you're over aroused, you're thinking too much, you even be thinking about other things, you could be getting too excited, and you're not focusing on the task at hand because you're not focusing enough. Therefore, this disproves the theory. So we can't rely on it. However, we got this one here called the inverted U hypothesis. So this has got a curved shape here, and it states the low level arousal will lead to poor performance, and it also shows the same trend as the Hulse-Dry theory that as arousal increases, so does performance. But then we get to this zone here. This is our optimal zone by here of performance, so you're optimally aroused. However, you can now get over aroused according to this theory. So if we start going down here, you can see our performance is dropping because of those high levels of arousal. Take someone like Usain Bolt. Even though he's in a power event, he's got the 100-meter sprint start to contend with. If you're over aroused and your adrenaline's going, you can cause a false start, which can then get you disqualified from the race. However, if he's under aroused, his reaction time can be really, really poor, giving him a massive disadvantage, and therefore then having to play catch up. So he needs to be in this optimum level of arousal in the middle here. This is where he's in the zone. This is what we mean by optimal level of arousal. This is when everything feels easy to an athlete. You've all been in the zone yourselves before. So being in that zone, in the optimal level of arousal, causes peak performance, or as it states on this image, maximum performance. With the inverted U hypothesis, though, it looks at different types of skills, different athletes, and different sports. We'll have a look at that now, just have a quick recap. So we can be under or over aroused, and both affect sport performance in a negative way, but there's an optimal level of arousal. If you download this and click on the link there, it takes you to Tracy McGeady just going off in a basketball game. Like I said, there's variations to the theory. So have a look at these sports and think where you would want them to go. So have a pause of the video, just so you're looking at this image and try and work out where they would go. Right, we're going to look at three in particular. So we're going to look at shooting, we're going to look at rugby, and we'll look at weightlifting. First of all, shooting. Shooting goes with this one here. Sports that require a high level of focus require lower levels of arousal. But the reason we got these different arches on the graph is because they have different optimal levels of arousal. So you can still be under aroused or over aroused for any of these, but you've got to make sure you get in that optimal level. So for shooting, it's this one here. So you want lower levels of arousal to create a high performance, and this is because you want to control your adrenaline. You also want to ensure that you're focusing fully on the task at hand. This will increase your accuracy, and obviously increasing focus will stop you deviating and thinking about other things. We'll go to the big one now, so this one that goes along here. Weightlifting will go here. It's a simple movement, and you can see here how he's screaming. He's getting himself to a high level of arousal. So their optimum level of arousal is all the way up here. So you got this for the shooter and this for the weightlifter, a much higher level of arousal. However, he can still get over aroused because even though it is quite a simple movement, if he mistimes the movement, he won't be able to lift the weight. So there's still an optimal level of arousal, but because it's a short power event, then it needs a much higher level of arousal. Then we got the rugby player here. Now the rugby player, which may surprise some of you, needs to come in here. Now there'll be times when they have really high levels of arousal, but the thing is, because there's a lot of decision making to be made in a team sport, even though they need a high level of arousal to complete things like tackles, if you're over aroused, you could perform an illegal tip tackle and drop an opponent on their head, or perform a high tackle. This is going to cause a penalty against you and your team. Obviously, you don't want this to happen. So when there's decisions to be made and there's specific techniques, you want like a medium level of arousal. But having a medium level of arousal means they're thinking clearly and they can ensure they're performing the correct technique whilst being at a high enough level of arousal to perform quite a powerful move. It's also the same when they're running like set plays. So if you look at the backs in rugby, when they're doing some set plays, maybe off of a line out, they need to be making sure that their timing is perfect and they're hitting the line and their passes perfectly. If they're over aroused, they're likely to overthrow a pass, or if they're under aroused, they're likely to miss time a run. So you want a medium level of arousal here. Got two types of skills. You've got complex skills and simple skills. Complex skills are skills where you have a lot of small muscle groups working together. So something like darts, realistically. And then you've got really simple skills. So that's where, like a gross motor skill, that's what simple skill is. So you've got big, powerful muscles working together. So if we look at the complex skill, if we relate this to like a fitness test, so if you do a reaction time with a ruler drop, so that's quite complex compared to the simple skill because you need to catch between your thumb and your two fingers the ruler as quickly as you can. You really need high levels of focus. Or if you're doing something like, if you've played the old board game Operation, it's a really fine motor skill where you need to really concentrate. Because you need to control those muscles, you want to slow your heart rate down, slow your breathing down, reduce that adrenaline so you can perform that skill appropriately and get that optimum level of arousal. However, if we look at like the vertical jump, so the sergeant jump, that's a very simple skill. Now to jump as powerfully as you can and utilize your leg muscles as well as you can, you need a much higher level of arousal. And because it's a simple skill, that higher level of arousal isn't going to affect the performance. Now we look at different athletes. So we've got beginners, intermediates, and elite. So beginners need the lowest level of arousal. Intermediates obviously in the middle, with elite right at the top. And there are like specific reasons for this, and a lot of it for elite athletes comes around to previous experience and motivation, and for beginners it comes down to their skill level and having to actually go through the learning process. So beginners are still learning. If you think they haven't developed, like their nervous system hasn't developed to perform the skill properly, and also in terms of their game knowledge, like they can't make decisions quick enough. So if they experience high levels of arousal, they go to pieces essentially. What that means is they become overwhelmed and they just sort of give up realistically. So by keeping those anxiety and arousal levels low, it allows that learning to take place. Once that learning takes place, they can experience higher levels of arousal, but it's really, really important that they learn the skill and they learn tactics first. Like I said, it will cause them to execute the skills poorly and also to make poor decisions within a game. Elite athletes have already been through that learning process. Therefore, they can experience those high levels of arousal. When you become to an elite level, or like even if you've just been playing something for say 10 years, like most of yourselves, you're used to those skills. Therefore, you can experience the high levels of arousal because some skills are automatic now. Consider like throwing a ball with your dominant hand compared to your non-dominant hand. It's much easier to throw it with your dominant hand, and it's almost natural to do it now. That's what elite athletes are like with their skills. The experience of competition as well, elite competition specifically, will give those elite athletes high levels of arousal, allowing them to reach optimum performance. So, looking at their opponents, having the crowd there, millions of people watching on TV, that gets their arousal levels up and it allows them to get that optimal level of performance. Is what gives them that motivation, that hunger to perform well. Um, and what an elite athlete can actually do, if they get over aroused, they do something called reverting back to their dominant behavior. Now, this is due to their experience because they've had a lot of experience. They've been through learning. They've had a lot of experience when things have gone wrong. They know how to correct this, so it can reduce that arousal level and get them back into that optimum arousal level much, much quicker. Whereas if you look at a beginner, they go to pieces and overwhelmed. They got no experience to go back on, and they're still thinking of how to actually perform the skill, which is why they go to pieces. Intermediate athletes are in between, so they don't get the experience of like the high stress or high arousal from elite competitions. They're not quite there yet. However, they've been through the learning process, which is why they can have medium levels of arousal. When it comes to discussing this theory, I need you to go through all of that, making sure you get all the different athletes, all the different skills, giving sporting examples like we've talked about here. So maybe with the different athletes, look at like a Sunday League footballer, maybe look at like a college level footballer, then look at like a Premier League footballer, something like that.